The Four Horsemen have arrived. Woo! That's right, we're talking X-Men Red, number 16. What comes after the Four Horsemen? Hi, I'm Laz, the fifth horseman. Woo! Obligatory. And I read comics so you don't have to. Today we ask the questions. Will Arakko survive the Horsemen? Will Storm deploy an ultimate weapon? Is Port Prometheus going to survive? These questions will be answered today on The Newest Mutants! Before we begin, please don't forget to like and or subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you enjoy these videos. It really does mean the world to me personally. And by world, I at least mean Arakko. With that, let's look at the Red Planet. Our story begins with a spaceship approaching Arakko. Its destination, Port Prometheus. The cargo are several mutants. As the passengers talk amongst themselves, the pilot comes back into the cabin and tells them they won't be landing at Port Prometheus today because there is no Port Prometheus. And that's because the Horsemen have arrived. We cut to Kobak, where SZA has just arrived with a battle report and an instruction to get to the far riverbank to regroup. SZA also has another mission, and that is to retrieve a weapon known as the Uranos Trigger. As described by this text right here, the trigger will release Uranos for 1 hour at a designated location to create carnage. He will then leave. Uranos is an eternal and a very powerful being. When SZA grabs the weapon, she begins a conversation with Uranos, and Uranos begins to try to tempt SZA to use the weapon. SZA is overwhelmed by this, but Kobak brings her kind of back to reality, asking her what the trigger is. She says it's death that walks. We cut now to Sunspot, who is carrying the Fisher King. Roberto is very upset that the Horsemen were able to even arrive. He blames himself for getting too cocky and arrogant and not planning ahead. The Fisher King urges focus, and with focus, they can save people. Roberto doesn't think focus will be enough. We cut now to Nova, who is out there in Port Prometheus trying to save lives. Unfortunately, he has to contend with Famine. Famine, who has now brought a raging flood to the streets of Port Prometheus, claiming it won't be just a drought that causes a famine, but also a flood. Too bad Storm is here, and Aurora just sends down a lightning bolt and fries Famine to a crisp in a series of pretty cool panels. Next, Storm turns her attention to War and her burning flames, and using her manipulation of the weather, Storm is able to extinguish the fire that surrounds War, leaving her as just a pile of bones. This is when Death steps up to challenge Aurora. At the same time, Pestilence lines up an arrow at Storm. Storm attempts to parley with Death. They speak about rules, but it doesn't matter. Pestilence lets her arrow fly at Storm. And that's when Nova flies in and takes the arrow for Storm in a moment of great sacrifice. Storm wants to immediately take him away to try and save him, but Death steps in and stops her. He's like, hey, he's got the plague now, and it will spread by touch. Death is mad at his sister Pestilence for interfering, for breaking the rules, whatever they are, I'm not really sure. And so Death uses his powers and kills his sister Pestilence. Death claims it was a challenge by insult. And poof, that is when SZA appears, and she has the Uranos Trigger. She gives the trigger to Storm, and now Storm is immediately in a conversation with Uranos, much the way SZA was. He gives her the option to unleash his power, and he will end every single life that is not of her faction. The choice is hers. And so we cut to a Krakoan gate. It is forming in the ground. And who steps out of this portal? Well, of course, what follows the Four Horsemen? It's the apocalypse. And that's the story, except it's not the book. This issue has a Finn story to it. a final story, an addition. Look, it has another story, okay? And it's with Sunspot and Shark Girl. And here is a quick overview of that story. Roberto and Shark Girl are at Snake Island off the coast of Brazil and discover a cult that is turning people into snake people. They bust up that party and come to find out the priest is actually King Cobra, and he wasn't turning innocent people into snake people, but poachers. He is protecting this island. Later in the evening, Shark Girl and Sunspot return to the island, and they scare off some poachers from the island and tell them to warn others that it is under protection. And with that, we get somewhat of a happy ending. And that's the book! Welcome now to the part of the program where I like to thank you for making it this far. And of course, it's question time. Today's question: who will Apocalypse side with? Will he side with his wife, Genesis, and their children, the Horsemen? Or does Apocalypse have another plan in mind? Will he side with Storm and X-Man? Weirder things have happened in the Marvel Universe, but let me know what you think in the comments. And now, back to the show. Okay, time now to give credit where credit is due, but first let's check out this cover by Stefano Caselli and Jesus Abertov. Right here, we get the Horsemen entering the battlefield. Pretty cool. You gotta love it, how they're drawn. I'm a big fan of the Death character there, who's kind of front and center in all of this. But let's move on. The writer for the first story is Al Ewing. Artist is Yadilre Chinar. Color artist is Federico Blee. And our letterer is Ariana Mar. Now, our second story has different writers and artists. And so the writers for our second story were Rafael Dracon and Carolina Munoz. Artist is Marcelo Costa. Color artist is Felipe Sobrero. And our letterer is, once again, Ariana Mar. And as always, Marvel's editor-in-chief is Mr. C.B. Cebulski. Okay, I got a takeaway here, and it is, what does Apocalypse want? His children arrived, caused a lot of chaos, but 3 of them are already down, so he shows up. We can only speculate, if you haven't read ahead, and it seems we have a showdown in the making. Storm has the Uranos Trigger. Apocalypse is here. She can end it all if she wants. And I think that's what we'll be looking at in the next issue. How will Storm react to the revelation of Apocalypse on Arakko? It's exciting time for Mars, if you ask me. And with that, let's check out my favorite panels from this issue. My third favorite panel is from the side story with Sunspot and Shark Girl. It's this panel right here of these really cool snake statues. You know, something struck me about it, and I just love the imagery of snakes. I think it's really cool. As Roberto said, it has this sort of Tolkien-esque vibe to it. Pretty cool. My second favorite panel, and you know me, I love the last page reveals, and we have some excellent art here, and it is of Apocalypse walking out of a Krakoan gate. Absolutely stunning. The use of shadow and light here is very awesome. Pretty sick. Finally, my favorite panel is this multi-frame full-page shot of Storm just electrocuting the life out of Famine. It's really cool, and she leaves him a smoldering mess after he flooded the city of Port Prometheus. Fantastic art here. Big fan. This is my favorite panel of the book. And that's the show. Of course, before I go, I always love to share a book from my collection, and this issue has both Storm and Apocalypse on the cover. From the Executioner song, it is Uncanny X-Men number 295. This is a cool Brandon Peterson and Terry Austin cover of the X-Men just straight up curb stomping Apocalypse. It's a great cover, but check it out. This came with a card on the back. You can check it out right there. And it's got Bishop and Wolverine. Pretty neat. I've got a couple of these Executioner Saga cards, but I don't think I have all of them. In any case, awesome cover. Join us next time when we talk about Wolverine number 38. This has been the Newest Mutants!